It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Audie Cashion. Everyone tells you you can have it all, yet few can show you how to get there. Audie Cashion is a business consultant, certified one-thing trainer, and work-life balance coach. He has a diverse business and time management background with 31 years experience in international consulting, coaching, real estate investing, and brokerage. He earned a BA in economics from UNC Chapel Hill and has lived in Japan and Dubai and traveled extensively for business. He currently lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and 2 daughters. He enjoys mountain biking, facilitating men's growth groups, and speaking on peace and purpose through his educational nonprofit, the World Peace Center, which is a 501c3. In fact, special offer, get his free article about counterbalancing dental work-life stress. His father was an orthodontist who died too young of a massive heart attack due to stress, yet a second passion became his first passion, and that is to serve the dental community with getting their time in life back by working less and accomplishing more. But I think the other most interesting thing about this gentleman is when he went to UNC Chapel Hill in 1988, he sat behind Michael Jordan in an economics 10 class. Did you know at that time that Michael would be worth $1.5 billion today?
Absolutely not. I would have signed up for his major, Howard, if I would have known that.
So how was he? What was he like?
You know, it's funny. The professor, Art Benevy, and it's interesting because someone that went to Chapel Hill, I mentioned that name, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you took Econ 10 too?" And I said, "Yeah." Art used to give Michael Jordan a hard time because he knew he was going to be a top earner, and he would talk about these different curves and everything on the economics and how much money he was going to make and where he was going to put his money. Michael Jordan just was a great guy. He was really cool about it, and he played along with him.
And what was your dad's name?
My dad was Leonard Cashion, Leonard Robert Cashion.
Leonard
He was
Robert.
an orthodontist in High Point.
High Point.
North Carolina.
Wow. And how old were you when he passed away?
Wow, it was my senior year of college.
Oh my God, that's just terrible. And so in that pain, you found you found purpose. You wanted
Absolutely.
So tell us about your father first.
Yeah, so my dad, pretty fascinating. I really loved him. I really connected with him, and he really, I thought, had great work-life balance because he would play basketball with me, come home early from his practice, and we would just hang out together. And I remember one time at Chapel Hill, he used to not force me into dentistry, but he would encourage me if I wanted to join him in his practice. And so he would take me down when I was 8 years old, and we'd go through the dental school together. And that song came on, and I know you probably have heard of it, "The Cat's in the Cradle."
Right.
And I said, came up on the radio, and we were literally passing the Carolina Inn in Chapel Hill. And I said, "Dad, that's not like us, is it?" And he said, "No, sport, it's not." And so anyway, long story short, and Howard, we actually have a connection. So my dad hung out with his dad on a bread truck. So I think that's what you told me about, in your story, in your book. And that's how he hung out with his dad. But my dad had visions and dreams bigger than just doing what he did in his growing up. So he went to school. He was in the military, went to school at Appalachian State University, another ASU. And so he graduated with a football scholarship in being a teacher. But then he said to my mom, and he said, "Sweetheart, I want to do dentistry. I'm passionate about it." And so she said, "Well, I don't want to hear you say this your entire life. Let's do it." So they went back to dental school, borrowed from friends and family in every way that he could possibly do it, had a child, my brother, and he went through dental school. And so he graduated. I'm very grateful for the dental profession for what it gave me.
Leonard Robert Cashion.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is amazing. Just an amazing story. So how did that affect what you're doing now?
Well, a great question, Howard. So I was down at Chapel Hill, and so my dad's second passion is what I picked up, and that's how your mindset affects your performance. And so all the things that you write about in your book, we all know in dental school, we don't get that kind of training, either stress management, practice management, how to relate to people. All those things are things that you have to learn outside of getting through the clinical part of dental school. And so anyway, he was very fascinated with that. So he gave me a passion for self-help books like Think and Grow Rich and different things like that. So I was down at Chapel Hill and I'd started a couple of businesses. One was an export company to Japan. And that's how I got connected in the Japanese thing. But I was supposed to be studying for my exams, and my dad said, I called him up and called up my mom, and my dad said, "Hey, Cool Breeze," and I said, "Hey, Dad, why don't you come down? Why don't you have dinner with me in Chapel Hill?" So they came down. After we had a great dinner, I said, "Hey, Dad, you don't seem like yourself." And he was sitting on my bed, and it was just the two of us. And he looked up into my eyes, and he said, "Audie, I just can't handle the stress. I can't handle the stress anymore." He drove home that night to sleep it off as he would normally do. He walked upstairs, had a massive heart attack, and died in my childhood home that night. That was when I was, just graduated from college. And you can imagine, like, if you were in that situation, our family was really in turmoil about what do we do to sell the practice. I mean, it's like fresh fruit. If you're not getting that practice sold, and taking care of the family, the remainder of the family, what's going to happen. So, how you can imagine how that would feel.
Wow. That is, and he passed away in 87, right? 87. Right. That was the year I graduated from dental school. That is amazing. So what do you think about, everybody in the media is talking about, burnout in healthcare, physicians. Of course, there's 1 million physicians and only about 200,000 dentists. So there's 5 of them for every one of us. But it looks like it's a problem with dentists, physicians. Do you think it's something that's getting better with knowledge, or do you think it's getting worse?
It's really getting worse. And Howard, that's a great question, because we sort of, like you said in kind of the introduction, is we want it all. And the challenge is, we can only do so much. It doesn't matter if we're Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Michael Jordan, whoever, Tiger Woods. There's only a limited amount of time, a limited amount of money, and a limited amount of experiences that we can all kind of experience in that triad. And so we have to make choices. And the challenge is we kind of overload ourselves with those choices, and that's where the burnout comes from. And so what I teach, the one thing, is really about how do you choose very focused, and the more that you narrow your focus, the greater your success. So you think of it in terms of, specialists in the industries that we're talking about, in the in the physicians and dentistry and stuff, they typically, because they specialize, they can make more money doing that. So when we specialize in something and we focus on something, the more we narrow our focus, the greater our success.
So, that's been the trend in America. I mean, when healthcare in 1900 was 1% of the GDP, there were no specialties. By the end of by 2000, there was 14% of the GDP and 58 specialties in medicine and 9 in dentistry. Now there's 10 in dentistry. So the specialization you're saying that's been naturally occurring for the last century is the way to go.
Absolutely, in our lives as well, because there's 7 areas of life. You've got your spiritual, you've got your physical, because we can't trade in our body. We've got your personal, and the personal is really how do you put the oxygen mask on yourself? A lot of times people forego that. They don't really live for themselves, and so they just completely ignore this category. For me, like that, I go out and ride on my mountain bike. That's what lights me up. I think are you still doing triathlons and things like that? Is that kind of what lights you up? Is that right?
Yeah. I just feel better when I eat less and move more.
Absolutely. And then if you keep going around, there's that relational aspect. So the key relationships. So that's with your personal and your professional life. So like for me, my one thing in my personal life is I do one-on-one dates with my leading ladies. So that's with my wife and my 2 daughters. I'll do one-on-one dates to enter their world. What can I do that would really excite them? And then you go around and you do in your job. So what you do at the chair, what you do day in and day out in your practice. And then finally in your business, or not finally, but the 6th one is in your business. And so how do you work on the practice to make it, maybe your vision is you don't want to drop dead, while you're practicing. You want to have something like an exit strategy. How do I sell my practice? How do I get my practice in a place of being able to sell it? And you can't start the year that you're ready to retire. You have to reverse engineer that. And then finally, your finances. So those are the 7 areas I talk about having one thing in. You don't want to do it all at once. You want to just do them one at a time. And those are all in priority sequence of the most important thing. Because you think about it, your spiritual life, you've got to be fed. Your physical body, you can't trade it in for another one. So we got to take care of it and so on around that spectrum.
And what do you call these? The 7 areas of our life?
Yeah, 7 areas of life. Mm-hmm.
The 7 areas of life. And and you're saying they need focused on like a specialty. And that's spiritual, physical, personal, relationships, personal and professional, occupation, business with an exit strategy, and finances. Where do you see from when your dad passed to now, what of these 7 areas are getting better? What are getting worse? What are flat? What do you think the dentist listening to you today should be thinking about?
Well, it's a great question because I just spoke at the Georgia Dental Association on Friday. And I think the biggest challenge is, and what I'm hearing is, it's really in 3 areas. It's really, how do I get more time? How do I get more energy? And then the third thing is without the stress. Because they'll say things, and what I see and hear, and this will maybe resonate with you as well, and I'd be interested in kind of turning the table and finding what you think the number one challenge is. But it's like, I don't have time to go to a live event because I have to take time off away from my practice. I've got recalls or whatever that's going on that's already set up, and so I can't take that time away from my practice. So just like you, with your futurist vision of, what if we could all just go online and find out how somebody needed to do a procedure? The reason that you started Dental Town, which I love, is you dig into, let me do it online at my own time. So it's really, how do I bring it to them through online media, just like what you're doing, of getting it out there so that it can help serve them? Because nobody wants to leave this planet and leave loved ones behind. Every day I go back and I hang out with my mom, my daughter's grandmother, and I think about, what happened if my dad would be here, how much he would adore these little girls and how much they would adore him. So I don't want that for anyone else in their family.
So you say dentists want more time, energy, and less stress. Well, what do you mean by more time? What they want? More personal time, or what do you mean?
Yeah, basically the things that fuel their spirit. It's kind of really that personal time. So like what I'm hearing and consistently across the board is exercise. I want to be able to have my own exercise plan. I want to be able to spend time with my loved ones, the people that I really care and love. I want to be able to do things other than just work. I want to have more of a purpose in life. They talk about, I'm always at work and I don't want to look back in 15 years and say, is this all there was? I want to have something else. I want to travel. I want to be with my family.
It's amazing. You're talking about, I'm sorry to keep bringing up your father. When my father passed away, it really felt like someone was standing on my chest for half a year. In fact, my first victory was driving home from work one day, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I haven't thought about my dad yet today. And I was driving home. Took half a year to get to there. I mean, he was my everything. But they're saying now that they've realized the average animal in the animal kingdom, regardless if they live 100 years or a month, is having about 1 billion heartbeats. And it's amazing how when you exercise, it slows down your heartbeat, makes you live longer. But exercise is so amazing. So they want more time so they can exercise, spend it with their family and all that stuff. What do you think's draining their energy?
What I see, and again, it's what has been told to me and through these surveys and everything that I do, a lot of this deep dive with people, is they get into a profession and a lot of times they'll feel stuck because there's a personality type, I believe, that makes a great dentist, and that is, unlike you, not an extrovert as much, but they're very focused and they're methodical. You have to be. It's like flying a fighter plane whenever you're doing dentistry. And so I think a lot of that gets internalized. And when something like stress starts to happen or a problem patient or whatever, that you get, it's not as much that they extrovert that and they go out and they're able to get their A team together. And whenever I talk about A team, it's someone that you can call at literally 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, my spouse just kicked me out of the house. We had an argument. It's one of those type people that you can know, like, and trust at that level. And so to be able to open up and share about whatever those stresses that are going on, like I never knew that my dad, had that kind of stress. He on the outside looked like he had work-life balance because he wasn't in the office all the time and he was engaged with our family. But yet at the same time, I didn't know all that stress that was building up inside. I'll give you an example, Howard. A really close friend of ours who, her husband is a specialist. I'm not going to keep names and everything very generic, but she basically said he's in burnout. We're having to sell his other office, and I can't tell, and he can't tell all the people on his team. And so I said, she knew what I did, and I said, I'll help, and he basically said, I don't want the help, because if people found out there's a stigma, if someone is in that burnout place, both in the office and outside of the office. And also, as I understand it, in North Carolina, if you're not upfront about some things on your whenever you reapply to get your license and all that, can continue that, then you could get in trouble with the board, and they're going to be digging into what's going on. If you've had suicidal thoughts and all this kind of stuff. So there's a shame factor or a stigma to that, and so I think it makes it difficult unless you have a safe place to go to. And what I do is I do mastermind groups for dentists. It's where they can come and they can talk about their problems. We had a mastermind group just the other day with some of the UNC alumni. And this guy said, I just feel so much better because I can't even tell my wife about what's going on in the office because I don't want to stress her out. But it was this problem with a patient that the office had kind of messed up on the insurance, and it was a very expensive mistake. And he was basically saying, well, the practice needs to pay for it, And so he was trying to work through, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with the patient? Because I don't feel like it's right for them to come out of pocket, this amount. So where do you go to have those conversations, and even places that are internal things that are going on that are stressful?
So in your 7 areas of life, spiritual, physical, personal relationships, professional relationships, occupation, business, finance. So you were saying that your father, or that a lot of dentists have a lot of stress from professional relationships, and they do live in fear of the board. And it's brought on by incompetent government, all governments. Look at the IRS. Hey, you owe me taxes. How much I owe you? I don't know. But if you get it wrong, you'll go to jail. Well, shouldn't you know? You're the IRS. I thought you had 50,000 employees. Why does Google and Facebook and Amazon, if they were doing taxes on you, they'd know where you were when you bought everything, let alone how much tax you owed. But the boards have gotten better. I remember 30 years ago, I don't know how much stress leads to substance abuse, and it's primarily alcoholism, even though everybody talks about everything else. But in 87, if you were an alcoholic, they took your license away. Now, if you're an alcoholic, they show you empathy like a doctor should and put you in a program. Do you think the stress leads to substance abuse, or born with an addictive personality leads to a substance abuse?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, obviously, I study this, but as far as what I've seen, and I'll give you examples, my dad had his own office building and rented out to another orthodontist who, at the time before my dad passed away, went and drove back to Chapel Hill, near the dental school, went to the police department and committed suicide. And my dad had 2 people that he knew committed suicide. One that actually had an affair in his office, and his wife, whenever he died, she opened up his drawer and found videos, and she had a nervous breakdown as a result of finding those videos of him acting out with his assistant. And, I've got an uncle that was a dentist also, and he got hooked on nitrous to take the edge off. So all I can say is, from a data perspective, I think we all have, at some level, we either have to let it out in healthful ways, just like you exercise, things like that, meditation, our spiritual practices, all those things in those areas of focus in those areas of life. We either we're able to counterbalance or metabolize those things, those stresses in our life, or they're going to act out. We're going to act out in uglier ways, like you said, alcoholism, drug addiction, pornography, or whatever it is, suicide. So I would say that we all have, at some level, we can only take so much stress, and those personality types who are more extroverted and can share that information with other people and get healing that way through either like a group, a place where they can share, like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, if they've gone down that path, or it just will internalize and then explode, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I did a great podcast with Wendy Gesson, and she's been a mental health expert. But she's telling me after 30 years, everybody in her group thinks that substance abuse overlaps mental illness challenges, probably at least 80%. When you were lecturing in Georgia just recently, What were you hearing from the dentists in Georgia? How's their life going down there in Georgia?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, one dentist actually brought not only his A team, as he calls it, and that's what I call it as well. It was funny. I was like, "Did you read my slide deck before you got here?" But he came with his office manager, and he also came with his wife, who was also one of the hygienists and in the office. And so it was really cool because a lot of them really went deep fast. I talk about someone being an introvert. That doesn't mean that they're not going to share. So like within this group, and I'm not speaking about anyone in particular, I shared about, hey guys, I'm quite anal retentive. I apologize for that, but I did something today that the icebreaker was, what's something that nobody knows about you? And I said I didn't iron my shirt a second time to be here today with you because typically I would do that. And they said, well, I'm actually OCD, and I'm like, wow, that's cool that he would, one of these people would go that deep. And other people said, you know what? I've got an anxiety problem. And so there was a lot of real transparency and being authentic that opened the door for us to actually get a lot of healing and do some really deep work about what is it that I want to do. One of the dentists there was a specialist, he's an orthodontist, and he basically said, I came here because I wanted to see how to increase my profitability and my productivity within my office, but now I think I want to work on my spirituality. That's really my one thing that I want to focus on as a result of this workshop. So it was really some good stuff. Somebody else said that was retired and they're moving to Switzerland and they're going to be able to live the life of their dreams. Another guy had just graduated from dental school. He was 2017. And the older gentleman said, this needs to get into the dental schools. We've got to have this in the dental schools. And I said, well, interestingly enough, I'm going to have a conversation with UNC Chapel Hill about me being possibly on, like an adjunct professor or something like that, to have these conversations before they get out of dental school. Does that, you see where I'm going with that or whatever?
Another person you talk about is Dr. James L. Wiley, DDS MBA, Senior Director, Practice Institute, the American Dental Association. What are your thoughts on him and all that?
What's fascinating, so last year I actually spoke at the Georgia Dental Association on their conference, and that's why they had me back last Friday, because I had that connection. Well, I met Jeff Cole there, and he was, of course, the incoming president, now the president of the American Dental Association, and I shared my story with him, and I said, what do you think? How can we get this out there? How can we help the dental family, which I include myself, a member of that? And he said, let me introduce you to somebody that's our board member at the ADA level over practice management. Whenever I was introduced to him, Jim, Willie, and I pronounce it Wiley too, but he
it's
basically
Willie.
said, yes, exactly. Okay. And he basically said, Audie, I have been focused on the dental burnout phenomenon for most of my career. And he sent me an article that he wrote, and I can send it to you, but it's fascinating. He wrote it 2 months before my dad had his massive heart attack. It's September 1987. He wrote it. And so he said, what I want to help do is I don't know all the answers all the time, as far as but I feel like we can bring the right people together. I think what my skill set is being able to facilitate. So I've reached out to Jeff and to Jim to see what we can do about maybe getting the message out about how do we basically counterbalance dentistry life stress for the dental family.
Well,
I haven't heard back from him yet.
So you call him Jim. His name is James L. Wiley, or you call him Willie?
It's Willie.
It's Willie.
Jim Willie.
When he starts talking about stress, the first thing he talks about is the rise of dental student loans. I mean, these unlike your dad and I, when the year your dad passed, I came out of school, $87,000 student loans. My God, they're coming out of school $280,000 in student loans. And they don't even know business. So how do you see economics, student loan debt playing into the new stress?
That's a great question. The dental students, when I spoke at the dental school, they said that. They said, we've got to figure out solutions to this because it's just way too stressful. Some of the specialists, as you probably know, $800,000 to $1 million, and that's just getting through and not even buying a practice or anything like that. So really, it's about what you teach in your book. It's some basic skills and, business management, practice management, but also focus. And that's what I feel like I teach. What I bring to the mix is really a very simple business plan that's not complicated. One of the things that Tony Robbins said is complexity is the enemy of execution. And when we have things that are too complex, just like you talk about, uncomplicate business in your book, how do we do that? How do we uncomplicate it? It's when we have a simple plan with a simple goal, 3 different priorities, and 5 strategies under each of those priorities. That's your 12-month moving forward plan. And you make a very simple one. You get it collaborative with your team so that everybody's on the same page. It gives a lot of clarity. And I did that with a dental practice as a pediatric dentist. And they were having problems with being basically chronically off schedule. And the woman was amazing. I mean, she's gone to MBA school and all this other stuff. So she had business acumen. But what we did was, in getting together, as a team and having me facilitate that, they were able to come up with, they had one sheet of paper that had information for the patient, and then it wasn't being uploaded in the system so that the front office and the back office were talking. So they were actually, that was what was causing the chronic being late. And then I talked to her 2 days later and I said, how's it going? And she said, it's fantastic. Literally, our team has come together even greater because we've had kids acting out. Literally, our front office, has come and sat on the floor to help these kids, and it's just been really pretty powerful for us to be on the same page.
Another issue that's really got the dentist stressed out is not only coming out with all this student loan debt, but they see corporate dentistry. And it's a type of competition they haven't seen yet. Do you think corporate dentistry is them looking at this other beast competing for resources? Do you think that's a big driver of their stress?
Absolutely. That's a great question. One person that I interviewed, he basically bought a practice. He came out of corporate dentistry to buy a practice, and he said, you've either got to go one way or the other. They're gonna race you to the bottom as far as the pricing is concerned, and you're not going to compete with corporate dentistry going to the bottom. And you're going to either have to have that really high-end experience of great customer service to be able to continue to keep those relationships and to make your practice viable. So I think that's definitely a big stressor.
When you talked about the 7 areas of life, and 2 of them were on relationships, personal and professional. I'm going to go back to professional. We talked about boards, how they deal with when you mess up or something like that. Do you think group practice is mentally healthier because instead of being the only dentist in the box, like when I got out of school in '87, the first thing I did is I hired an associate. Now looking back, it just shows you how completely crazy I was, because I wasn't smart enough at 25 to hire someone 65 that knew everything and could teach me everything. I hired someone my exact same age because I just wanted to hang out with a really fun guy. And it was just so fun to always be back there talking to Savage and Giacobbe and all these guys. So do you think professional group practice is healthier than solo, or not really?
I think that's a great question, Howard, because you're right. If you've got that interaction, and just like whenever you create a dental town, you can reach out to somebody and say, hey, can you check out this? This is what I'm thinking. Does this look like the right plan? And then you also have that moral support, because one of the things the last mastermind group I did, they basically said, you know what? Sometimes maybe you guys don't even have the right answers, but it's just nice to know that you're going through the same challenges that I am. If you've got somebody in the practice with you like that, it actually does help you in that regard. So it's a great question.
You asked me what I think stresses dentists out. I mean, on Dental Town, there's oh my God, how many posts are on Dental Town now? I mean, but so Dental Town, I mean, it's a great survey, because unlike most social media, every single post of all time has been archived. So there's been 250,000 users. They posted 5.5 million times. Whenever stress comes up, they're a human. It's always stress with their staff, stress with their patient. They go home stressed with your 3 ladies in life, your wife and 2 daughters. How is that going to change? How do these people deal with other humans? And if you look closely at humans, what I find the most bizarre is when you look at the herd of 8 billion humans living on the surface of Earth, they're all in these communities, half are urban, half rural, but you look at them, they're all driving to work alone in their car. They go home, and surprisingly, the average house only has 2.5 people in it. So they're these social creatures who, when you observe, they're saying, I'm kind of a loner. I don't want to stick my hand up. I don't want to interact with my neighbors. So how do you justify this creature who really wants to live like somewhere between a monk and a small house of, 2.5 or 3 people, versus now you got 5 staff, you got 20 patients today. You're just always interacting with people. And I think sapiens are most relaxed when they're alone, not when they're with a bunch of people. How does Dennis move forward in that?
It's a great question. And two, like we said earlier, Howard, a lot of times the people that are attracted and drawn to dentistry are more introverted in nature. So they get their batteries recharged, not by being around people like you and I do as extroverts. This is energizing. What we're doing right now, I love doing this. I love talking. But they get their batteries recharged through, being alone. So I think really where that happens is, like, for me, my morning ritual. I actually, at night before I go to bed and also in the morning, one of the 2 times, and maybe sometimes both, I'll actually have meditation or have my quiet time. I'll read my scriptures, my Bible, and have that quiet time for myself, because it really energizes me, even as an extrovert. So I remember my dad had that as his morning ritual. He would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He'd read his Bible. He'd read other books, devotional books, and he'd have that quiet time that it would be able to recharge his batteries. Another thing I do, and this is in my personal side, is I'm a big mountain bike rider. So I love being out in the woods. So just that connection with nature and seeing all the beauty that's there, that can actually bring your stress levels down. You could walk in the woods, you can jog in the woods, or you can ride a bike in the woods, whatever that looks like. But being out in nature just really can actually help us reduce those stress levels. So where along this journey did you, Audie Cashion of Audie Cashion Consulting, come up with your website, onethingaway.com, or Audie at ourworldpeace.org? Which website should they go to more? Should it be? Would it be ourworldpeace.org or onethingaway.com/North Carolina? Right. Really, the one thing away is how I'm serving dentists. So the way that the World Peace Center, and I know that's a kind of crazy, big, hairy, audacious goal, but I believe that if I help people find their passion and purpose, leading them to ultimate peace, whether we can co-create world peace, one individual and organization at a time together. And so that's really my nonprofit, the educational nonprofit. And so what I do, a lot of that is just give away training and things like that through Facebook Lives and different things like that. I'm actually in connection and have relationships with people in Mogadishu, Somalia, over in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, all over the world, just like you're doing, and able to help serve these people, to help them find their purpose and narrow that focus down. So really, from a dental perspective, that's really, the nonprofit is me giving back. But from the dental perspective, it's really one thing away, and they can just download that, that article that I wrote about counterbalancing dentistry life stress.
So again, one thing away, I've got both sides. So onethingaway.com, you got to do a /North Carolina, right?
You don't have to. I've written, and it's been published in several different articles. The article's been published in different, but it's really the same article. So it's in Georgia Dental Association, the North Carolina Dental Society, and the alumni at UNC Chapel Hill, and a couple other publications out there. So it's just really, it's the same article, just with a different page on the front, essentially.
And then once again, what is your ourworldpeace.org again, with the audacious goal? What is it? What is that again?
Yeah, what that is really about helping people find their passion and their purpose. Just like your passion and purpose in life, when you find that, it gives you a lot more peace inside. You're not, because like compassion, the feelings of compassion, if we have compassion for people, we wouldn't be fighting with each other. So if you can build enough one individuals and one organizations that we have enough compassion, the vision is to co-create peace together. So that's really what I do. And I help, like, as it relates specifically to dentists, I can either coach and work with the dentist one-on-one, or I can work with his team to help him have a different culture to help those business goals that he wants to execute. And it will help them have a better culture and work-life balance within the practice.
One time I had the extreme honor to have lunch with the founders of Insight here in Arizona. It was one of the fastest growing. It was Dell during the 94 to 2000 big internet deal when it was ran by Microsoft, Intel, Dell, and what was Cisco. These guys were number two, and they were right in our backyard, and they lived right near me. And I asked them, I said, you're two boys from Iowa. How the heck did you, or were you born a genius? He goes, no. They said, our mom and dad were in the military, and we were military brats. And every 2 or 3 years of our whole childhood, we were living in some different country. And me and my brother would be laying in bed thinking, because you lived in Japan and Dubai, and I've lectured in all these countries, and I took 1, 2, 3, or 4 of my boys to 50 countries, and my boys all say that was the biggest education in the world. And when I hear people saying things that are just completely disconnected from reality, they've never left the United States of America. I mean, hell, a third of my friends in Phoenix have never even driven to the Grand Canyon. And there's just something about, do you think being exposed to more areas of the herd of humans opened up your brain and made you see reality more clearly?
That's great, because that question just gets at the heart of really why I started the World Peace Center. And really, I went to Japan, first of all, as a homestay program. So I was still in college. I was a sophomore in college. I was fascinated when I was a kid growing up. I'd play ninja and samurai. So I had the shuriken and stuff. And down in the basement, I've ruined a door because I kept throwing these stars and ninja stuff in the door. My mom wore my butt out. Okay. But I decided I wanted to go to Japan to see if it was really what I perceived it to be, back in the old days. And so I stayed with this family on a homestay program with the Friendship Force. And the really cool thing is when we, we were divided by everything. We were divided by culture, by language. I couldn't speak Japanese. They couldn't speak English. But yet I could feel the compassion, the care that they had for me. And then I knew about, obviously, what happened at Pearl Harbor. And, I wanted to go see Hiroshima. And so I went to see Hiroshima, and I went through the museum, the Gimbaku Dome is what it's called, the Peace Dome. And I went through that, if you've probably been, Howard, but it was just horrific about seeing those people that were vaporized into walls and all just the horrors of war and the aftermath of all the radiation and everything like that. And as a young college student, very impressionable, I said, if I can do one thing in life, I want to commit and make a vow to myself that I will help co-create peace, wherever I go. And so that's where that whole vision came from. And then I said, I want to live in a culture that's diametrically opposed from ours. And that's why I went to Dubai and started traveling to Kuwait and Israel and Egypt and Jordan and all those countries, with a business over there. And so I believe exactly what you say. One of the best things that we can do to help people grow and to expand their knowledge and their brains and to be able to open up to new ideas is travel. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And really that interaction, not just travel, but actually get into the culture and actually experience relationship with other people. So that's what it sounds like you've been doing too. And I've seen some of your videos of where you guys are hanging out in Australia and, just having a meal together. I met this guy on Facebook, and we just started doing Facebooks together because we had common, visions for helping create peace. And, he's got 800 some thousand people that follow his Facebook site. And so I brought him into our house whenever he was over here in the States from Pakistan, and it's just that cool situation where just like you and I, we've never met before, but now there's a relationship. You know what I mean? It just can transform your mind.
Yeah, I think looking back at so many dental personal relationships, they got into some humanitarian, charitable, missionary dentistry. We on Dental Town, we just put under humanitarian dentistry, then we separate it with charitable and missionary because there's, religion brings out so many strong feelings, as does politics or whatever. But so many of the people, they all report the same thing. I remember when I did my first one, I just couldn't go. I was too busy. I had this practice, this family. I just couldn't do it. But I couldn't tell this guy no because he was just so neat. And I went there, and it was like I completely unplugged and it was just the most spiritual, I would say the most spiritual experiences I've ever had were in a foreign country treating, the other population, and it just puts everything in perspective so much. Do you recommend to stressed out clients that are, to think about missionary charitable dentistry?
Absolutely. And I want to put those type visionary type practice missions programs together and partner with people that are already doing it to bring some people on board to go, because that is truly my heart. I think that's it. And where did you go, Howard? What was it like? What was your first experience like? What was that aha moment that you had then?
My first was with Jerome Smith, who took me to Chiapas, Mexico, and so we're getting ready to go, and my staff finds out they looked on the government website, and there's a travel advisory to go there, and they said, just don't go there. So I told them, I'm not going to go because the State Department doesn't think I should go. And they're like, don't listen to that. That's all baloney. And we went down there, and it was 5,000 Chiapan Indians without running water, electricity, or sewage, and they were the happiest people. And after the long day of work, you felt bad because after, you did it all day, you're sitting there relaxing, having a beer, and they're standing out in line with their babies all night long in the rain with these stoic faces, knowing their baby's not in a good place, and she wants to see, and I mean, it was just like, and then you're sitting there thinking, do you need a bigger house? You sit there in your 401k and your overhead percentage, and you're thinking of all this noise. And it comes down to a mom trying to help her baby. And I mean, it's just so cool. And the people that I know in dentistry, specifically dentistry, the ones that are the most happy, grounded, and centered, a humanitarian dental mission where you leave the 20 wealthiest nations where 1 billion people live, and you go to, the world's got 8 billion people and only 2 billion are on the internet. So 3 out of 4 cows in this human herd aren't even on the internet. And when you get there, they talk about it in the state, are you addicted to your smartphone? Well, why don't you go where 3 out of 4 people don't own a smartphone? And then you're all worried about everything you don't have. Why don't you go spend some time with people who have so much less than you? But the takeaway for me is, why are they all so happy? And then when I go travel, like you talk about Tokyo, when you go to New York City, Seoul, Tokyo, London, Paris, I've lectured all those places, the people all seem really wired and stressed and in a hurry. And then you go to where there's no electricity, and they're all just smiling and giggling. And it's like, that's just not the story the governments and the economists and the Federal Reserve is trying to tell you. They're trying to tell you, you need to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and be a millionaire and pay taxes and fund. And it's like, dude, I've been to where they don't have any of that, and they look like they're having a much better time than everybody trying to get on the subway in Seoul. Do you agree or disagree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Saudi Arabia, I thought was the craziest place in the world for drivers. I went to Seoul, and those people were racing around like maniacs. And I'm like, God, how do you not just, like you said, burning out? At some level, our bodies are not meant to be wired like that, to have that stress. And like you said, you go to a place like that, you unplug, you do something that's purposeful with the gifting that you've been given, and you just feel such a centeredness. And like, yeah, I'm not the only one on this planet. It doesn't matter about, I need to have 3 more bedrooms and 4 more cars and 2 more boats or whatever. It's like, what really does matter? It's those people that I love and I care about. The people are not those that are going to be like, oh, look what kind of car he drives, or whatever kind of house he lives in. It's going to be those people that show up beside of your bedside when you're dying, and you want them to say the things that are really meaningful. Like, this man was a great father. He was a great husband. Or this woman, she was a great mom. I know that, my dad, I felt really proud of him because people see even this many years later, my mom's 93 years old. She's lived with him longer than, away with him, them not being married than they were married. And we still get comments about good old Dr. Cashion. I loved how your dad cared about me, and so it's one of those things like, what kind of contribution are you making in the world? What kind of legacy are you leaving? And you really, since we can't take it with us, how do we actually de-stress? How do we give back? How do we feel that purpose in our life and bring that out? I do an exercise that I did with these dentists in Georgia, and I always do that. It's really about how to find your purpose in like maybe 20 minutes. And, it's not something that's going to be set in stone. I tell everybody, because I know we're all kind of anal retentive. We want to get it right the first time and make sure it's perfect. But I say basically, just do, how many of you have ever married your spouse on the first date? We never did that. So let's create a purpose statement that's good enough to date. And then that will help you. And then you can make choices like this orthodontist did. And he said, you know what? It's not about more productivity or more profitability in my practice. It's about my spiritual life and my life with my relationship with my family, my kids, and my daughters. So I love what you're saying. And it truly does change that paradigm. I love that. How could we get everybody to have that opportunity, Howard? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So they're listening to you right now. They're driving on their way to work. Talk to that person. She's 25. She just walked out of dental school. She's $285,000 in debt. And everybody's told her from birth that you can have it all, but no one told her how. And here you're saying embrace the one thing thinking. What does that mean? Tell her right now. How does she find her purpose and embrace the one thing thinking? In fact, what is the one thing?
Absolutely. So the one thing is a book. You've heard of it maybe in City Slickers, the line, you've got to find out what's your one thing, and then it's basically, well, how do you find that? As Billy Crystal says, well, that's the difficult part. That's the hard part, is finding your one thing. What that looks like is, if you picture in your mind, and obviously you guys can't see my hand, but if you picture in your mind an iceberg, okay, how much of that percentage of the iceberg is sticking above water? What would you say, Howard, percentage-wise?
What is it, 10% or less?
Absolutely. 10% of that iceberg is sticking above water. So what we don't see underneath the waterline is that other 90% of that iceberg that's pushing up what we do see. So at the very bottom of that iceberg is you have to define what your life's purpose is. I asked these dentists in Georgia, and, I said, okay, we're talking about purpose here. How many of you already have a practice purpose statement? All of them raised their hands. Then I said, how many of you have a personal purpose statement? None of them raised their hands. And I said, that's great. Most of the world doesn't know what their life's purpose is. And so at the very bottom is you create your purpose, because that helps you know what to say yes and what to say no to, your priority. So, if someone says, hey, Howard, you got a minute? Well, if you're in the middle of a podcast, you don't want to be interrupted by doing that. No, I don't have a minute. I'm focused on my one thing right now, which is I'm doing a podcast, right? Same thing with life. Someone says, hey, you want to do this baseball team? You want to do this? You want to do that? Well, is it taking me away from what my purpose in life is and from my priorities, which we don't see under the waterline, but above that is what productivity, that's what we see. Someone who's very purposeful, very much has their priorities in alignment, they will get higher on that iceberg, and they'll have that productivity that other people in the world can see. And then above that is profitability. Look at yourself. I'd love to hear your story about what you were doing whenever you were just, a single practitioner, like you said, whenever you got out of school, and then how much the changes that you've had and how much impact on the world around us. 250,000, people that are doing this with Dental Town and all the lives that you've changed and transformed. Look how productive you are, and look at the profit that you've probably made. And I'm not asking for actual numbers unless you care to share it, but look at the very top of that pinnacle of that iceberg is the impact that you're having in people's lives. And I think that's a beautiful thing. That's the example right there. That's what I would tell that 25-year-old woman.
Well, that 25-year-old woman listening right now, she says, well, I don't want to listen to you on a podcast. I want to go on the City Slickers, the Dude Ranch. I'm going to go do this in Montana on a ranch. It was a great movie because these City Slickers went out to a dude ranch and they were trying to find what the secret of life is. You're doing something like that with these mastermind groups. Are those all being done in North Carolina? Where are your master groups at?
Great question. So the way we do it is, again, the biggest concern that I hear with dentists is this. I don't have time to go to a time management seminar because I just don't have the time. And it's ironic. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I know you probably heard that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that seems a little backwards or ironic or asinine, but I get it. And so it's like, how do I take it to them? So the One Thing Away Challenge is a very simple, focusing on one thing, and that you're going to do it consistently where I can coach you virtually. And it basically takes less than 30 minutes a week to kind of get it set up and everything. Then I ultimately have other mastermind groups that are online, that we have safe groups of people, of 5 people, 4 to 5 people that are dentists, your peers. And then we get on the line and we talk, at 8 to 8:30 Wednesday night, or whatever time works for the group, because I put these groups together. They're intimate, relationships. And then we talk about what's going on with the one thing thinking mindset, to be able to help them figure out what it is that I need to do to make this happen. Like if I need to buy a practice, or how do I dump debt faster, or do I need to do that, or what, all those things that they talk about. And if you would like to do a mastermind in person, we do that as well. So it's really just reaching out to me. If you want to send a personal email, it's just Audie@ourworldpeace.org is the best way to reach out to me. And I'd be happy to serve you, figure out what it is that I can serve you at the highest level. Because obviously it's my passion. I don't want someone to go through that and having to say, I wished he would have, or I wished she would have, because I would rather have them around rather than the new car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's so bizarre how humans know when their environment's not right. They start slowly harming themselves by not exercising and eating wrong, and then it just gets getting worse and worse and worse. And by the way, his name Audie, that'd be Audie, Audie, at ourworldpeace.org. But back to that one thing. When you're putting these mastermind groups together, is it a phone call? Is it a Facebook group? What is the technology? How do these groups meet, and how many are in them?
Great question. Well, I'll do kind of a vetting to make sure that the group synergy works, because I know, Howard, you probably read, the Think and Grow Rich, because that's where that first mastermind group was coined, the phrase mastermind. But they've been going along for forever. C.S. Lewis and had his mastermind group, and Harvey Firestone and Warren Harding and Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. And as we know, Henry Ford was said to be illiterate, but he accredited his success with the group of people that he was around. Jim Rohn talks about we're the average of the 5 people that we hang around with. And so what we do in a mastermind group is we make sure that there's safe, competent people that really work well together, because basically what you're going to do is you're going to become even closer than family. You might tell people in your mastermind group things that you would not tell your spouse or anyone else on the planet, because it's just a safe environment to be able to get that stuff out. And so then what we do is we have a structure around what we go through together, the one thing thinking, the one thing mindset, and getting that in line with what's the one thing I can do today, such that by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. And when you start changing that thinking and you think very narrow in your focus, that's whenever your success increases. I know Dave Maloney, and he talks about how his practice, whenever he started doing this same thinking, now obviously I didn't teach him how to do this, but he did that thinking. He went from 22 days in the office to 11 days in the office. His practice, productivity, and profits increased. So that's what we're talking about doing, is how do we either replace yourself or get other people so that you can do what you're passionate about.
So are these mostly phone calls or video? But back to the technology, how's your group meeting? Is it phone, video?
Zoom calls, just like Skype, but Zoom, where you can get everybody together so you can do face-to-face. Yeah.
Do you like Zoom better than Skype?
I do, because Zoom, you can record it. It's and I haven't used Skype as much. I've used either GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting, and those are a little bit more cumbersome. And Zoom is a real light application that I would really highly recommend. And then whenever you're talking about a mastermind group, it actually picks up each person's face and everything like that. You can record it. It's easy to send the MP3 or the video. So it's really a robust platform.
Well, Microsoft, which from 94 to 2000 was one of the 4 horsemen. Microsoft and Intel, they call it the Wintel monopoly. Then it was Dell and Cisco. And now the new horseman, it's Facebook, Google, which is Alphabet, Amazon, but it's Microsoft again. And they just bought LinkedIn. They own it. And so they're talking about that they're going to make, like I can FaceTime you on my Apple phone, that when you have the Skype app on your phone, you can FaceTime that. And I'm hearing about this because my 2 boys that live in Texas, so I think Microsoft has the money and the resources to walk away from this technical thing. We've noticed in study clubs, but back to the mastermind. When I talk to everybody I've ever met that runs a study club, they've always said the most interesting observation to me that when it's under like 9 people, better at 7, best at like 5 or 4, they all open up. But with that little narrow band of just like 7, 8, 9, and definitely by 10, they all go into classroom mode. Mm-hmm. And if you want to know anything, if you want and on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, 90% just lurk. 1% post all the original content and 9% engage, right on, LOL, whatever. Just if you're on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, just open up all the people that you follow and then start seeing, just do 10. When's the last time the first 10 posted? And when you see that the first 10 starting with A haven't posted this year, you'll understand what we're talking about. So in these groups, do you also see smaller is higher quality and we go into personal open up mode? And once we get into double digits, we're in a classroom. We might as well just be, talking to a billboard.
Absolutely. I've had to try to work around that because whenever I do so let me back up. The mastermind that I was telling you about, they basically said, you know what? I said, how would it be better? How can we improve what we did, what we experienced? And they said, you know what? If you're going to get dentists involved, it's going to be 4 or 5 people. If you get any more, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to have the conversation. We're not going to have the rapport and that safe environment feeling. It's just going to be more about information. So you're spot on. The situation that I had too, basically in these different masterminds, and it's very similar for other masterminds too. It's not just dentists. I think we're all that way because once you develop that rapport, like, you read in my bio, I like to facilitate mastermind groups with men. You don't start talking about, acting out, an affair, pornography, alcoholism. You don't start drug addiction. You don't start hearing that if there's more than like 4, 5 people at the most. That's as big as those groups can get. Once you get down to that level, you're going to talk about real things. And I'm going to give you an example. I was talking to my dentist here in Cornelius, and I said, okay, I want to get this message out. You've heard it. He said, Audie, you're gifted to do this. I really feel like you've got a great story, and they really need to hear it. And I said, who should I reach out to in Charlotte? He gave me a guy that really is quite impressive. He's actually on the board of one of the study club groups. And so I went to him and I could see all the things on his walls, like you, Howard, he's got it all, you know what I mean? And I went to him, and I always like to do this with anybody that I'm talking to. He was helping me line up people and ways to get speaking engagements, study clubs, different things like that. And I said, okay, well, how can I help you? And he said, well, you know what? These study clubs have helped me so much. That's one of the reasons that I'm on the board level, because I believe in them so much. And he said, my practice is humming along like a well-oiled machine. Our team is great. I have a great relationship with my wife, with my kids. Obviously I knew that he was tonning it with the money. And then he leaned back like this and kind of stretched, and he looked down and he patted his belly and he said, except for this. He had that belly fat, which we know is deadly. And he said, I need to do something about my health. So we all have one thing that we can work on.
So it was Tarun Agarwal in North Carolina. Was it T-Bone?
No.
Oh, sorry, T-Bone. I love you. He's my favorite dentist in the world and the favorite one from North Carolina. So I was just teasing. But anyway, keep going.
So yeah, it's what I'm trying to say is even when we've got those study groups and those things like that, if we don't have that A team, those people that literally you can say, hey, I got to have a place to stay tonight because my wife kicked me out or my husband kicked me out. Those type people, or I've got a terminal illness, or I've got a drinking problem, or, those type people that you can go to, your A team, those safe people that really encourage you, they're for you, unless you've got that, I wish my dad had that is all I can say. Those people that he could have come to and said before he said it to me that night and said, Audie, or, to one of his peers and said, I just can't handle the stress. I just can't handle it. Well, let's do something about it, Leonard. I care about you too much. How can we get this taken care of?
So So if someone's listening to you right now and they're saying, "Look, I'm not going to open up about this on social media. I'm not going to go on social media and talk." By the way, interesting research and things that I keep reading about on social media. The difference in Google and all the other social medias like Facebook and everything. On Facebook, here's a beautiful picture of my wife and 2 daughters, and here's my and you're just it's just advertising your best. Then on Google, you're like, oh my God, what do you do if you can't quit drinking, eating? You want to kill yourself. So Google is a truth serum and Facebook is all baloney. And then the psychiatrists go on further to say that the more time you spend on social media, the more depressed you are because you think everyone lives in this perfect bubble and your world's falling apart. And I've said on this show, since show 1, that in my experience, the dentists who get consultants, they're always produce more, collect more, happier, slower. I mean, every metric works out right if they're taking 100 hours of CE a year and they always dabble in consultants. And what do? They don't want to take CE and they always want to buy expensive technology like lasers and CAD cams and all this stuff like that. And my God, every successful dental consultant at the end of the day is really an untrained armchair psychologist that's letting you talk to someone and form a relationship who has seen other dysfunctional relationships. And if you're listening to this right now and you're not happy and healthy and having fun, well, you're not going to get happy and healthy because you bought a laser, a CAD cam, or put some initials behind your name or went to some institute. You need a psychologist, an armchair. And the thing that's great about dental consultants is a normal psychologist would know the nuances of stress at home, maybe at work, but not the specific ones to dentistry. And I've always thought the best dental consultants could have easily been a psychologist. Do you consider yourself an armchair psychologist?
Again, great question. I like to consider myself a coach because at some level I am an armchair psychologist because I deal in those things like one person at my UNC Chapel Hill, alumni from Chapel Hill, the presentation two weeks before, she said, well, can I ask you a personal question? I'm sure. That's what I'm here for. And she opened up after the event. We all stayed together and talked in a round circle, again, just a few of us. And she said, I feel like I don't have good boundaries. I feel like I'm giving money and I'm enabling instead of empowering people that come into my lives. They always say, hey, I've got this situation. Can you lend me some money? It's just the last time. She said, I don't feel comfortable telling them no because they're family. And so it's one of those situations where you reflectively listen, like you're saying, Howard, okay, so you basically do what a psychiatrist, well, not a psychiatrist, but a psychologist would do and a therapist. And then you have those weekly sessions where you end up coaching that person to be able to let them know they're not crazy. They're making a good decision by saying no. So that's exactly what you're talking about. And it's also the same thing in our lives. You think about it. If you could do whatever it is that's not working in your life at the level that you want right now, what would have happened? You would have done it, right? So the key is trying to find someone that can help you create that structure around whatever's not working, your health, your relationships, your finances, whatever that looks like, your practice. How do we do that? How do we find someone? Well, it's get a coach. A therapist, the reason I consider myself a work-life balance coach is it migrates into both. We're not, two-dimensional human beings. If we have a crappy day at home, we come into the office, we're going to be pissed off at, our associates, right? And it's the same thing. If we have a crappy patient that's in the chair that ruins our day, we're going to kick the dog, right? We're going to kick our spouse or our kids or whatever because we've had a crappy day. How do we deal with that? And so that's what you're talking about. And I think you're right on. And the key is that consistency. Like my coaching calls, I've got them set up every week for 30 minutes.
So the other bizarre thing, having lectured for, since 1990, you say, hey, before we go to break, does anybody have any questions? No one has a question. You go to break, and then all these people heard you one on time, and they never want to ask the question because they think their question is always unique. And I don't think I've heard a unique question in a decade. But I know my homies. He's 25, or he just bought his own practice or whatever. And he knows he's got a special, unique thing you've never heard of. How does he contact you? is Audie, AUDIE, at ourworldpeace.org. Is there any other ways to do it?
Absolutely. If they want to actually book a time with me, bookwithaudie.com.
Bookwithaudie.com.
I'm trying to give an easy way for people to use their schedule.
Yeah, I always like to do mnemonic devices because they're driving in the car. I always retweet. God, 25,000 Twitter followers. Thank you so much, guys. I can't believe 25,000 of you guys follow me. That is beyond crazy. But they're doing it because I retweet my guests. So you're Audie_Cashion. You're at Audie Cashion, and you're at World Peace CNTR on Twitter. But to remember your name is Audie. AU is the element gold, and die is what we make all of our crown and bridge on. So you should be the gold die. So you'll remember Audie, AU for gold, DIE for a cast die. So it's gold, cast die, Cashion. We got to think of something for Cashion. Oh, you'll have more cash. But seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. If my homies don't have their head on straight, if they're not happy and healthy, and you talk about all the fun things that people do in life, I'd still rather pull 4 wisdom tooth than go to Disneyland, Disney World. I mean, I just love that stuff. And you just, my God, if you're not having fun, if you're not having the giggle factor, it's just not even worth it. But one last thing before I let you go, about your world peace, and we both talked about Japan, but you also had a very thriving export business in Dubai. What do you think dentists in Japan and the United States and Canada don't realize unless they live day to day in Dubai? How is Dubai different than Japan and North Carolina?
That's a great question. So interestingly enough, with me living there for 2 years, you think of people like the Bedouins, the guys with the tablecloths over their head and everything like that, and that they're backwards and all that. But the technology and all the things that they were doing, I mean, you've read about it, but someone once said, and this was the analogy that was used, if Las Vegas is a fire, then Dubai is a forest fire, because it's just got that much going on. There's pretty much, you could do anything there. I mean, honestly, you've seen it skiing inside, snow skiing inside, it's crazy with the money that they have there. And it's really cool about the sophistication and the relationships that you can build with people from all kinds of different nationalities. People around the world come there because there's so much opportunity. So I had so many friends that were from India and Pakistan and the Philippines. I went to church there, and they had 22 different nations, people from Sri Lanka and all over the world, really kind of fellowshipping and having church together. I mean, I thought that was so cool, And so I really loved Dubai. It was really, really, I don't think they're as uptight, as most cultures. And I'll tell you a funny story there, because I'm anal retentive and my dad was an orthodontist, teeth mattered to me. So I had to get a crown there. And I spent years almost, is what it felt like. I would research who the best person was to put a crown on. I've still got that crown, and it's got a perfect bead around it. And it's been, I was there in 1992. So it's like the professionalism that they have there. The person was from London. The dentist was from London. But it's amazing the kind of professionalism and the people that they attract. Dubai.
I think that area of the world is the coolest, because I think living over here, when you live in America, you live in the Western Hemisphere. It's the other side of the world that only has 1 billion of the 8 billion people. Hell, there's more people just in Africa than both the entire Western Hemisphere. And if you go back through history, I mean, record the 10 oldest continuously living cities in the world. I mean, it's Syria, it's Greece, it's Bulgaria, it's Egypt, it's Lebanon, and I just love it over there. I mean, the culture, to say the culture is rich, I mean, basically civilization started in the Fertile Crescent with agriculture 10 to 15,000 years ago, and I just love that place. But again, get yourself and your children out of your tribe, get out of your comfort zone, go to a foreign country, do some type of service to the underprivileged, and it'll put your head on straight. And then before you go start spending $3,000 a weekend on all these gosh darn high-tech courses and all this stuff, get your head on straight. I mean, he's telling you can call him and he'll talk to you for 30 minutes. I mean, he's been invited to the Georgia Dental Association, all these places like that. I had lots of homies wanting me to podcast you, sharing your message. And I actually thought it was coming from T-Bone. My gosh, get your head on straight. And once you're happy and healthy and you're centered, you're not going to harm yourself. You're not going to harm your patients. You're not going to harm your business, your practice, and just be happy. Even the United States Constitution, everybody always talks about the rights and amendments. The Constitution says right there, so that you can pursue happiness. We're going to do all these things and have this relationship with you just because our goal is for you to be happy. And no one talks about the pursuit of happiness. It's always about everything else in the Constitution. It starts out like, dude, we want you to be happy. And we came from other countries where it didn't look like everyone was having too much fun. And we're just trying to have a more fun society where you can be happier. And you have to do that. And again, I do not see it in the 20 richest countries that I've lectured to. And I see it in every poor, underdeveloped, I don't even like it called third world. I mean, that's judgmental in itself. I mean, they're just economically underdeveloped. But I'll tell you what, they're smiling, they're having fun, and they're enjoying life. And there's a lot of, 50,000 Americans took their life last year. And some of these big examples like Anthony Bourdain, you think he has the whole world because he has everything that you're told you should have. He didn't want any of it. The other one was that, what was that comedian, Robin Williams. Robin Williams. You look at Robin Williams and say, he's got it all. And he's like, I don't even want it. And so you got to find your one thing. And I personally recommend that you call Billy Crystal and go out on a dude ranch with Billy Crystal for a week. I think that would be very fun. In fact, if you ever do one of these with Billy Crystal in Montana, I'm there. Thank you so much, Audie Cashion. His website's ourworldpeace.org. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Howard.